This is the future. Welcome to Lightyear 1. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome adventurer and pioneer Alistair Humphreys.
Good morning. I am Alistair Humphreys, and I'm delighted to be here with you this morning to celebrate this latest milestone on Lightyear's great adventure. It's a midsummer morning, but tell me this, when your alarm clock beeped this morning at 4 o'clock, did you groan and think, oh, what am I doing? I must be crazy. I know that I certainly did do that. If you're thinking, what am I doing? But take comfort, though, from knowing now that you are amongst 1,000 other crazy people. You are not alone in this craziness here. And I'm an adventurer, and on my adventures around the world, I've always preferred sunrises to sunsets. They feel somehow more exclusive. Not a lot of people witness sunrises. It takes some effort, it takes dedication. If you compare that to a sunset, anyone can go to the bar on the beach and watch the sunset to having a beer. Anyone can have that, but you have to earn your sunrises. And today, you have chosen to get up at crazy o'clock and come here to witness a new dawn, to see something unusual, to see something exciting. And this immediately tells me that just almost by being here today, it shows that we're surrounded by adventurous spirits, all of us here, and that's always a good thing. This then is an environment full of adventurous souls where crazy and exciting and unusual things will happen. Getting started on long journeys is always the hardest part of all. For one thing, you're forced to begin each day with that long journey from your warm bed to the cold floor and somehow to summon up the boldness to continue, to get on with it. Getting started, step by step, this is the hardest, bravest part of any journey that you do. And today, we're here to celebrate Lightyear's latest step on their epic adventure to change the world. On the adventures that I've been on, the dark nights are often the hardest times. And these are the times when I've been most gripped by fear. Out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, the storms, the fear of capsize, disaster, no one to rely on but yourself and maybe your small little tiny team of companions, thousands of kilometers away from land, thousands of kilometers from safety. And as well as actual danger, nights, they're the times that are also filled with internal doubts too. The times when you're thinking, I can't do this, it's too far, it's too hard, I don't belong here, I'm an imposter. Nobody I know is doing things that are hard and crazy like this, so maybe I shouldn't be doing this either. Trudging through the night. This is the long, lonely, weary phase of the journey when you question whether you will ever get there, whether it's worth it, whether the sun will ever rise. But if you keep going long enough, the sun will rise. And God, that is the part that feels so good, so new, so optimistic. Everything feels possible in the early morning sunshine. So I remember from my trips with gratitude and appreciation, sunrises on the banks of the Holy Kaveri River as I walked across India, or from deserts, and the sunrises on deserts when I was cycling around the world for 4 years. I've spent 20 years now trying to live as adventurously as possible, to dare myself to be a little bit bolder, to scare myself and to stretch myself and to try to learn something about myself. I don't go on these journeys because they're fun. I go on these journeys because they are hard and miserable. Expeditions filled with frozen fingers or hunger and seasickness. It's a stupid thing to be doing, but strangely, somehow in the end, all of that, all of the hard things that build up to the eventual success of it, that's what makes it all worthwhile. It makes it all the sweeter in the end. That might sound like a strange way to live, and I know there are a lot of people who do think that I am very weird, but as we've established, we are in a room full of weird people this morning, crazy and adventurous people, so I bet that many of you also can, you know exactly what I'm talking about, this notion of having to work hard to earn your sunrises. An interesting thing about long journeys, as I've mentioned, is that no matter how hard the challenge is, the most difficult part is always the beginning. Getting out of the front door and starting requires the most energy and courage of everything that you do. The doorstep mile, this is the hardest part of every journey. What if I fail, I ask myself? What if I'm not good enough? What if it's really hard and painful? The team at Lightyear, they have come a long way already. But perhaps this morning might be your doorstep mile moment, that small but crucial step that launches a new phase of the adventure. And I, for one, am excited to imagine what might lie ahead. Today, we're going to be offered a small glimpse into what has kept the Lightyear team away from home, working for so many weekends, and what dragged all of us out of bed at dark o'clock this morning. I feel very fortunate to have traveled in over 90 countries. I made it around the world by cycling 73,000 kilometers and crossing the oceans by boat, which I hope this counts as a good example of a clean mobility. And the 4 years that I spent cycling around the world, they made me fall so deeply in love with the planet that we live on. It just filled me with so much excitement for life and a real ambition to fill that life as full and deeply as I can. I find myself just wanting to cram in as much of the wonderful world and all of its rich experiences as I can. Perhaps you feel the same way. But the more that I flew and drove across the world, chasing adventure and enjoying it all, the more damage I was doing to it. I was actually killing the very thing that I loved. And I'm ashamed to admit that it took me a long time to realize this, and then it took me even longer to accept it and to stop ignoring it and to realize that I too needed to make some changes to my life. There is an old Chinese saying that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time to plant a tree is right now. And so now I am trying to change the way that I live adventurously. I've begun exploring the opposite side of the world just to be able to take a nice showing off selfie to put on Instagram. You can have an adventure. You can challenge yourself. You can explore. You can be bold and take risks and live a life of adventure without having to harm the world that we love and care about. This time of year has become my absolute favorite time of year, midsummer. The days so long, so much sunlight, so much energy, so many opportunities to get out there and enjoy nature and the beautiful world around us. Maybe you'll want to float down a local river on inner tubes with your friends, or perhaps go sleep under the stars with your family. Micro-adventures like these have reminded me to be more childlike again. Not childish, but childlike. And to remember the curiosity and the excitement of living adventurously. And for me, that's building rafts or climbing hills to watch the sunrise, or merely stopping the car, as we did yesterday when driving here, to jump off a bridge into a canal with some local Dutch kids. I've discovered through micro-adventures that making big changes to the way I connect with the world does not have to mean sacrifice or having a less adventurous life. In fact, it involves thinking a little more deeply and just changing the way that I look at things and readdressing what my priorities are. None of that has diminished my adventures. And in fact, trying to be more mindful of my impact has helped me to do things more consciously, to pay more attention. And actually, doing this, I get more out of each small adventure that I do these days. So these days, then, you won't find me any longer rowing oceans or crossing far-off deserts anymore. Those experiences were incredible, but nowadays, my focus towards trying to live more adventurously and encouraging others to do that as well means that I'm much more likely to be found jumping into nearby rivers and shouting at the world to turn off your phones and come climb a tree with me. There is no denying that our planet is in massive trouble and that each one of us is to blame. The world needs to do something big to make things change. Something big and something quickly. But the problems can seem so huge and we're so small, and at times it feels overwhelming, so sad, so big. And each one of us, we're just one small, little, imperfect person. And so, therefore, very often it's tempting and easy to just hide and to do nothing at all. But if the world is going to change, if we are to become a generation that our children are proud of rather than ashamed of, then we need to do something about the situation we're in. And we have a choice. What will each one of us choose to do? Now, of course, I know that I on my own can't change or save the world. None of us can. But I can change my own life, little by little, day by day. And small changes are eventually what leads to big results. Each of us has a choice every day to either do something or to do nothing. I cycled around the world simply by climbing onto my bike, hugging my family goodbye, pedaling off down the street, and then not stopping for 4 years. You row across the Atlantic Ocean by dipping your oars into the water for the first time, taking a deep breath, thinking, oh, this is going to be really hard, but beginning anyway. And it's actually the very fact that the journey is so long and so hard and so unlikely, that's what makes beginning it worthwhile and what makes getting to the finish line so sweet. We're all privileged to be here on a journey today. And more than that, we chose to be here on this journey today to witness the next small step of Lightyear's epic journey. If you force yourself out of bed in the morning, dare yourself to begin, to get up, to watch the sunrise, and then you continue with those small little daily steps and changes, then you set yourself up for extraordinary experiences and for a life filled with adventure and purpose. Big things can happen from small beginnings. Big things like Lightyear's adventure to change the world. I'm delighted and honored to be here this morning with you to witness a special moment in Lightyear's journey. Thank you for inviting me along for the ride, and good luck with your own great adventures. Thank you.
On Sunday, the most innovative machines will take to the Stuart Highway for the World Solar Challenge.
In pole position today, we have the wonderful Stella Lux from Eindhoven.
De Lightyear. Is dat bijzonder? Dat is heel bijzonder.
Wij zijn in staat geweest om jullie droom, onze droom, mee mogelijk te maken. En wij als Helmond zijn daar buitengewoon trots op.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome CEO and co-founder at Lightyear, Lex Hoofsloot.
Well, good morning. I hope you all had a good cup of coffee. And I think you're awake by now, probably also because of the beautiful story from Alistair. Did you know that all the cars on the world combined drive about 9.5 trillion kilometers per year? And most of them are combustion cars. And to change that is a challenge so immense that it's almost frightening. And despite that, we started putting small steps forwards in 2012. We built the first four-seater solar car, and we've been in competitions, and through ups and downs, our confidence had grown that we might be able to actually do something about this huge problem. So that's why in 2016 we sat down to design a company from scratch, a company that would get to large impact in 10 to 15 years. And to do that right, to make the probability of actually getting to that impact high, you need to look very carefully at the founding principles of a company. You cannot change the founding principles anymore. Beginnings are special. And I want to walk you through the three main ingredients that make Lightyear Lightyear. And the first one is efficiency. And the great thing about efficiency, I really believe that efficiency is magical, is because efficiency means that you need less resources to accomplish the same thing. And because resources often cost money, are cumbersome to get by, and you have negative externalities, if you improve efficiency, you basically win on all factors. And that's why we radically focus on efficiency. And it has been in our veins since the World Solar Challenge, of course, since the competitions. And we've managed to find people all over the world that share the same mindset, that come from Formula One, from racing, from the aircraft industry, from Tesla. And what we are doing now is applying that efficiency mindset to mobility, because what we want to do is provide clean mobility. But let's look at the problem for a second, because actually it's quite simple. So what we need to do is build mobility that people can get from A to B, safe, comfortable, and effortless. And it has to be sustainable. And then to make it sustainable, there's one very obvious energy source. It's the biggest one on Earth, and it's 100% sustainable. And we want to use that, but there's only 5 square meters of available space on the roof of a car. So if you look at cars that are being built right now, and if you look at the energy you need to provide that convenience, and at the same time, the energy yield that you would get from that same car if you put solar panels on that car, solar cells, then you get to the point that there's a large gap between the two. And there's a large gap between energy yield and energy consumption. We improve that by using some key technologies. So the first one is using lightweight materials. The second one is looking at the chassis in a way that you can actually improve the weight by design, by reducing the wheelbase and a few other things. Then the third thing is aerodynamics, which are crucial. And then the fourth thing is that you need to improve the efficiency of the powertrain, of the motors and of the electronics. So then we reduce the energy consumption. But actually there's still a gap, so we need to increase the energy yield as well. We do that with electronics behind the solar panel that really make the car a lot more efficient. And the second one is to embed a very nice surface of solar cells within the roof that is actually quite larger than what you would be able to put on a normal car you have right now. And that means really taking into account in the design. So now we got to a point that we can actually match energy consumption and energy yield. And that is a very magical moment, because that means you have kind of an independent entity. And of course, this is over a year. This is not every day. But still, it's super important that now almost or all energy comes from the sun. And of course, this will vary for how much you drive, etc. But efficiency is not the only thing. To make a car really sustainable, you also have to look at the production of cars. And one of the most important factors for reducing footprint in production is reducing the battery size. So we push the limits and try to find a battery size that would, on one hand, give enough range, but on the other hand, be as small as possible. Then the second point to make a car really sustainable is that you should design it for longevity. So it should be able, it should have a very long lifetime. And this, of course, goes against what the rest of the industry at the moment is doing, because they develop cars for planned obsolescence, so they have to break down after 200,000 kilometers. But we want to put that upside down and build cars that actually have a long endurance. And you see that the business models that are coming up now, shared cars and autonomous cars, actually benefit from having a very long lifetime. And that brings me to the last point, and that is scalability. Because if we want to get to real impact in 10 to 15 years, then we have to prepare for scale. And we have to design the car for economies of scale as well. And our approach in this is threefold. So first is that we want to use existing infrastructure as much as possible. You see that the big startups that came up the last 10, 15 years, they all rely on existing infrastructure, like the internet. We want to do the same thing, but then for energy. Because basically, anywhere on Earth, you have two energy sources. One is the sun, And 2 is ordinary power outlets you have anywhere on Earth. Even in India, more than 80% of the people have this. And with these 2 combined, you can, and if you make sure that the car can really leverage these ordinary power plugs as well, you can actually leapfrog the grid and therefore scale the concept much quicker. The second part is that we want to rely on existing supply chains and manufacturing plants. And although we won't be able to do that for every part of the car, some new production methods will be needed. We want to limit that as much as possible. Then the third factor is that we radically focus on operating cost. So if you look at the business model of the future, then these cars will drive a lot. And that means that cost per kilometer will become very significant. So if we push energy consumption down, and therefore energy cost, and maintenance and cost for maintenance down, then you will get to very low cost per kilometer. And this is also the strategy we are using to get to super affordable price points in 10 to 15 years. And probably you will use Lightyears by then. And we hope that these cars can be used more affordable than it is to fill up your own petrol car with gas. And that is when the real tipping point will happen and when we can truly provide clean mobility for everyone. Thank you all for being here this morning. I would like to introduce you to one of my most important mentors, Carlo van der Weijer.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Carlo van der Weijer. I had the honor to know Lex and his team already for 8-9 years, I guess. And I had all kind of roles in those 8-9 years, from coach to changing their diapers in the beginning, to being a kind of arranger of sponsorships, to also being a student, because I think I learned more from them than they could learn from me. But maybe an important role from my point of view was that I always tried to challenge them to prove me wrong, because with all my wisdom I could easily explain that putting solar cells on a roof of an electric car is not going to work. That's not enough to power the entire car. Now, they proved me wrong on that issue. And then when you came to me 2 years ago to just say his plans, or tell me his plans on building an actual car, I again had a list of 20 issues why that's not going to work. And again, I challenge you to prove me wrong. Now, you checked already 15 of these ones, especially building a car with a relatively small, fresh team and with a limited budget. Actually, you're much further than I would have been able to estimate with my own wisdom again. So what do you think is really the essential issue in that endeavor?
It's realizing that so the industry doesn't know much about what the future will bring, and you probably don't either. So it's kind of realizing that nobody knows. So on one hand, it's involving really good people. So it's finding the good partners. And for us, I think the last 2-3 years have been a very steep learning curve, because we didn't know at all, of course, especially 7 years ago, how to build cars. And 2 years ago, not even how to build production cars. But we've managed to find people that are really great. Yeah. We expanded the team, and the partners really make it work at the moment.
So you have partners doing the suspension, which is a very specific knowledge thing that needs experience, etc. So you have partners for that. If you have partners for all things that other people can do better, what's there left for yourself? What's the focus point of yourself? The thing. What do you do?
Yeah. What we got from the World Solar Challenge, from doing the competitions, is this learning loop 3 times, where we could vary a lot of parameters and look what the effect would be, and building models to estimate what the energy consumption of these cars would be, and then we could predict up to percentages when we could, how long we could drive and how far, and so those models, as well as the components within the car, so the electric motors, the solar cells, we have the electronics we develop ourselves. So the key components we develop in-house to make the concept really work.
And you have a talent of finding the right partners as well. That's of course also good. So yeah. If you look at those 2 years, how would you describe them? How would you summarize them? Because it's another adventure that you went into.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, a steep learning curve. What we've tried to do as much as possible is involve early customers very early. So that means, I think already 2 years ago, we had people, and probably they're here in the room somewhere, they had a VR headset to look at the first designs of the car and judge them, and probably you had them all.
I was one of them, yeah.
And that is super important, and to involve them every step along the way, to not make this a technology project, but really a project about people and to make a car for the people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, as soon as people notice or know that I'm somehow involved with Lightyear, I always get the same questions, you probably as well. That's probably the same question in the heads of the people here. What during bad weather? What during the night? What during the winter? How do you solve that?
Yeah, or
I know the answer. What's your standard answer to summarize that?
Yeah, and people always ask also what happens if I park it in a parking garage.
Yes,
and,
exactly.
And important to note there is that the most of the sun you will get during the day, so you have not to look at your home situation, but your work situation, actually.
Okay.
That's much more important. But of course, you have a battery that's quite large. You can do up to, well, I will go into that a bit later, 725 kilometers of range. And that will make it a very efficient and very cheap to drive electric car, even without the solar cells. So you don't need the sun. It's a very nice bonus. And also, if you come back to the car in the summer, it will be charged again. That's one. But two is that it will also be cooled because of the solar cells. So you arrive in a nice, cool car that's charged again. So,
and the advantage of living in the Netherlands, we're very dark winters, that we have very bright summers, so that you probably get even then, but okay. Maybe one thing, I described my roles that I already had. There's a new role coming up, as you already said. I'm going to be one of your customers. Yes, I ordered it already a year ago, so follow the leader on that one. But that means I'm a customer. That means that your role of disagreeing with me is going to end in a year from now, because you know what they say about customers, they're always right. So what am I going to say back then? So I take this last opportunity, actually, that I also, because I know students, I know technical students, they're good in a lot of things, but designing a beautiful car, that's something specific where, again, I was a little bit skeptical and actually challenged you to prove me wrong. So my question, how do you do that? And I understood that you invited a friend for that as well.
yes. Yeah, let's, so this is the partner story. So let's ask Louis to join the stage.
Louis? Oh, no.
Ladies and gentlemen, this must be probably the first time that I say good morning at the presentation of a new car. And what a pleasure it is to be here and to be able to introduce to you the design of the Lightyear 1. It's the result of months of a very intense collaboration between my team and Lightyear. And last September, I already had the opportunity to present to some of you the styling model of the Lightyear 1. And at the time, I did that by introducing a small sketch that we made very early on in the project. It was a small sketch that showed a kid standing next to his father. And he turned his head and said, "Hey, look that, a car from the future." And I told it was a key sketch for us, because in a way it was the first sketch that captured what we needed to do with this design. But in a way I was being incomplete, because what we needed to do was not just design a car that looks like it belongs to the future, but what we needed and wanted to do was create a design that looks like it belongs to a better future. Because that is what this project is about. And that, I think, is also our task as designers, to, through the design, attract more people to move in harmony with nature. And with that came also the ingredients of our design process: people's pleasure, nature, the harmony between them, and also the feeling of freedom that comes with using a car like this. It's ingredients that are so obvious, because all too often they are forgotten. So at the beginning, we started with the people. what gives them pleasure. We didn't start making fancy sketches and trying to create immediately some shapes. No, together with Lightyear, we created a mock-up, and we simulated what we wanted that the life with the Lightyear 1, inside the Lightyear 1 would be. And designing the car was giving shape to that, enabling that. It resulted, for example, in a very simple and uncluttered interior that does away with the complexity and heaviness that we got used to. Instead, it creates a free space that gives you opportunity, allows you to do different things. Also, that is an interpretation of that feeling of freedom. And around those people, we had to create a shape that puts them in harmony with nature. That meant creating an extremely aerodynamic shape. It also meant integrating a lot of solar cells. And of course, we wanted the car to look good, because that's also the pleasure you want to give to people. Putting all those elements together was a long process, and today when I look at the car, it feels so natural to me that I honestly start to forget how hard that actually was. You will see that we also worked with strong graphics on the car. It helped us to balance proportions, find harmony in the volumes. But also, it allows us to create a darker underpart that reflects that the car can be raised and drive wherever you want. It gives a feeling of solidity, safety also, but above all, it enhances, again, visually, that feeling of freedom. And when later you look at the car, please look also at some details. You will see the mirrors, which we substituted with cameras. They actually improve the aerodynamics. You can look at the details of the lamp, and in that, I think you can read the intensity and dedication that everybody who was involved in this project worked with. And above all, I hope that you will agree with me that it does evoke that better future. And I do hope that in the future, there will be a kid that turns around. And above all, I hope that that kid will smile, because a kid's pleasure never lies. And I smile already now, today, in this moment, because we are arriving, I think, at a very special, beautiful moment. It's the moment where we can stop talking about the future, because that future is actually starting to become a reality. So without further delay, let's have a look together at the Lightyear 1.
Look around you. What I see brings harm to my future. How is this possible? For centuries, we have lived in balance. We harness the power of all that is around us. Forces too great to imagine, we have overcome. Why not let this be the inspiration? Why are we trying to repair a broken system? Let's shift our focus to the laws of nature, the laws of electricity, of motion, of aerodynamics. Let's combine all this power and all of this knowledge and create the car that nature would have built. Lightyear 1.
feels really great that I can actually show this to you now, because it has been some time. For some of you, 2 years into the journey, for some of you, a year into the journey. And I would really like to thank also Carly and Loie for assisting me in the presentation and giving this beautiful speech. I think this has been a lot of very hard work, looking where we could fit extra cells, looking how we could improve the aerodynamics. It's really work in millimeters also here in the back. And basically, what we realized when we started 2 years ago is that although there's a large part, and I'm very, very glad it's actually happening, is that quite a lot of people in the Netherlands are driving electric cars. But the Netherlands is way ahead of the rest of the world. And we want to make sure that electric cars are truly scalable and everyone will start using them. So what we did is researching the problems. Why were people still hesitant to buy electric cars? And we found that the 3 of the top reasons were that first is that people were not very sure whether electric cars have enough range to do all the trips that they needed to do. The second one is people were not sure whether they will be able to charge and whether there will be enough charging ports to do all their trips. And the third one is they were not entirely sure whether electric cars were really more sustainable than other cars. Because you still need to produce them, right? And the energy needs to come from somewhere. And what we realized is that these 3 factors can improve a lot with efficiency. And we actually said we might be able to get rid of them completely by radically focusing on efficiency. So that's why we started from scratch, built the car from the ground up, literally going back to the laws of physics and looking at and taking that as a starting point. And we have 3 other important starting points as well, of course, and that is that the car has to be safe, has to be comfortable, and has to be effortless. And then let's start with the third. So the third one was clean energy. So what you basically want to do with clean energy, and I already said that, is you want to start with the sun. And you want to work your way to the motors. And what you effectively want to do is get rid of as much as possible in between, not only to improve the well-to-wheel efficiency, but also actually to, because the infrastructure costs money. If you put the solar panels somewhere far away, then you will have to pay for the grid infrastructure, you'll have to pay for the buffering that's in between, and for the charging points. But actually embedding a solar cells in the car itself is quite hard. And we had 2 major challenges we had to overcome. So one of them is that we have to make sure, on one hand, that the solar panel is super efficient, and on the other hand, that it's very good looking and aesthetic. And on top of that, it needs to be just as robust as any car, other car hood or roof. And that's why we carefully selected a stack of materials that make sure the car is robust and the solar panel is robust, as well as having a super high efficiency. Then the second factor is the electronics behind the solar cells. Because nowadays, most solar panels you have on the roof of your house, they stop working if they're partly covered in the shade. And because electric cars are quite often parked in the shade, we needed to make sure that we can actually decouple all the cells in a string, and we can use all the cells to their full potential. So we've developed proprietary electronics that do just that. So now you can charge with clean energy, and that's great. But how will that feel like in real life? Well, and actually it will be that most of the summer, even in the Netherlands, for 2 months, you probably won't have to charge. So you come back to your car and it's charged again. And that is for average driving, and it will get better because the Netherlands is kind of the worst 1%. And the rest of the world is even much better than the Netherlands. And it will also guarantee that we are pushing to get the car to the market as soon as possible. And when it hits the market, it will probably be the most sustainable car on the market. Then the second factor I talked about is range. And although 90% of the time you don't need range, but in the 10% of the time that you at a random moment need to go on a large trip, it is super important to have that range. And especially if you live in areas where there's not so much charging infrastructure, you want to be sure you can get from home to your destination and back without needing to charge. So to improve the efficiency, we radically looked at efficiency again. And there's three main factors I would want to take you through. So I briefly talked about this, but reducing weight is super important. And what we did is managing the trade-off between the wheelbase of the car. If you have a smaller wheelbase, then you will actually reduce the weight of the chassis quite a lot. But at the same time, you want to put quite a large battery into the car to get to that large range. So it is really managing that trade-off between range and also the weight of the car to get to the really high exceptional range. The second factor is aerodynamics. And you can build super aerodynamic cars, and we've built them for the competition. And you all know that they don't look very pretty. So it's a real challenge to combine those two. And we are very glad that together we teamed up with Lowy, and we've been able to design a car that has extreme aerodynamic performance and at the same time looks great. And then the third factor is power electronics. So we have been developing power electronics and motors that will make sure that, especially at the speeds you most drive on, that the efficiency is super high. And this will make sure that you really can get to this exceptional range. But I have to say that a lot of stories are being told about range. So I want to talk a bit, and some of them are not true. So I want to talk a bit longer about what range really is. So because you have different types of range. You have the range that you have in winter, -10, you drive high speeds on the highway, and you have heating on. Then we will guarantee a range of 400 kilometers. But most of the time, you'll get between 600 and 800 kilometers of range. And then the last one that we have is the WLTP metric that auto manufacturers use to indicate the range of the car. And we can get to 725 kilometers of range. And because of this large range, you will effectively have one of the fastest electric cars from A to B. Because either you can drive on high speeds, or if you need to charge somewhere along the way, you can recharge the battery within half an hour for 300 kilometers. So that's range. Then the third factor I talked about is charging points. And I briefly touched this already. So we basically have two big energy sources here on Earth, so it's the sun and the ordinary power plugs. And we are very proud to announce that we can get to 400 kilometers of WLTP range charging just in one night from a normal power socket anywhere on Earth. And the great thing about that is that effectively every power socket, every power outlet becomes a charging point. So imagine the amount of charging points we have on Earth right now if you account for those. And we call this road trip charging, because this is something that will be super convenient if you have to do it at a hotel or a camping or somewhere else. But of course, you can also do this at home. Then that was charging. And on top of that, we have a whole list of other practical features that also define a car. One of them is that we have four-wheel drive, and it's actually independently controlled. So each of the motors can actually react independently to uneven roads. And we have quite some ground clearance. We have 20 centimeters of ground clearance. And the 20 centimeters will make sure that you can also handle a bad road infrastructure. Then we have a car with 5 seats, more luggage space than the average SUV. We have Apple CarPlay, and we have Android Auto to make sure you can use your navigation and your audio and play your own music within the car. And last but not least, we have a 230 volts power plug in the car So you can use any equipment you want anywhere in the world. And basically, the car will then be a very large power bank with solar cells on the roof. So this will make sure you can get to a really convenient road trip. And I hope that a lot of Lightyear 1 buyers will actually do that. So we set out, or the Lightyear 1 will be available for pre-order at the event today, if you want to be one of the first. But it's also through the website. Then we also, at this event today, have a room available where you can get more information about investing in Lightyear. You can do that from 100,000 euros. And looking at the timeline from now, we, of course, there's still a long journey ahead. I want to emphasize that, because this looks like a car that can be built right away. There's still some hurdles to take. So we expect to ramp up production in 2021. And we don't expect to get production hell, but it's a small volume, so that helps a lot. But still, anything can happen. So we set out to design a car that combines the simplicity of an electric car with the convenience of a combustion car. And we're super motivated to build electric cars, to build solar cars that will, in which people will never have to worry about charging. And they can enjoy their road trips with real peace of mind. And I also want to emphasize that we developed a lot of technology to get to this point. And I would also like to announce, and proud to announce, that we want to share this technology with other manufacturers as well, if they want to get to very efficient powertrains. Then we hope to inspire a lot of people all over the world to think independently, be creative, and to collaborate with nature, because there's beautiful solutions to be found that are for the benefit of us all. So I encourage you all to go free. Thank you.
For years, people believed that we could take and not give back. People invested in a system with an outcome where I, the future, would pay the price. Payment is now. Wake up. Open your eyes. There is a new future. If you are willing. Who will join me in the exploration of a world in which we are free? Free of the products that hurt society. Free of the companies in which we have lost faith. I invite you, the adventurer, the pioneer, into this era of knowledge. Go free and change the world. Go free and change humanity. Join me in this movement. Welcome to the dawn. of Lightyear 1.
Okay. Ja, we kunnen stap naar voren zetten. Nice. Thank you. It has been a real privilege to be on this journey for the last 2 years, also together with my co-founders, but also with the rest of the team. We're now 130 people big, and everyone worked super hard the last 2-3 months to get to this point, actually longer than 2-3 months. I also want to thank the early investors and the early reservation holders, because they have been really crucial to get to this point. And for now, I would like to encourage you all to enjoy the day.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I please ask you all to sit down again? Thank you so much. Please all sit down again. Thank you.